Carrie will be back in a minute, or? Karen is not. I'd like to begin the Governance Committee meeting. Is there any courtesy of the floor?
I have some questions. My name is Lamont McClure, Northampton County Executive. The first question I have is the two-term term limit for county executive. What is the disease that this cure is looking for? Specifically, we've never had more than a two-term county executive. Our first two county executives were two-term executives. The next one was one term. The one who followed him was one term. The one who followed him was two terms and was defeated in a primary seeking a third term. Then the next one was a one term, and this one is in the second year of his second term. So I'm sort of looking for an answer to why now, why this cure, what's the disease, and it will be important, not just because I have a constitutional small c role and a personal interest in why we're doing this, but the law doesn't favor ex post facto laws, and the law doesn't favor laws that could potentially be interpreted as singling out a particular individual. So it's going to be very important for all of us as we make our decisions moving forward with these ordinances to make a record so that future courts, should these things be litigated, can see what council's true intent was. So that's my first question. What's the disease we're seeking to cure? My second question is, what is the reason for the disparate treatment of each of the term limits? So just as an initial matter, there's a three-term term limit for county council, 2 for county executive, and 2 for county controller. Now, I think that is an interesting question, but I don't think it's probably the most pertinent question. One of the things that the ordinance for the county council term limit indicates that the limitation imposed by this section shall not apply to terms previously served by current members of county council, who shall, for the purposes of this section only, be deemed to be serving their first term. That reservation that you have in here for yourselves is not present in the term limit for the county executive or the county controller. What is the reason, council, for that disparity? Additionally, the term limits for county council describe succession. So you're limited to 3 terms in succession. You could take a term off and then come back, the way this ordinance is drafted. Also true of the county controller ordinance. That is drafted in terms of succession. So Steve Barron, who was elected by the people of Northampton County 3 consecutive terms, and who's taken a couple terms off, under this, if I'm reading it correctly, could come back and serve 2 more terms as county controller. Succession for county council, so you can come back. Succession for county controller. But interestingly, no succession in the county executive ordinance and term limit. Very interesting to me. I'll be very interested to hear what the reasoning is behind that. I'm sure there is some. I'm sure you've thought about it. I mean, we are dramatically, if not fundamentally, changing the way our government operates. So I'm looking for, these are my questions. That's what I'm here to hear today, because I think it's going to be very important, because very often when legislation of first impression is interpreted by courts, it does look to the legislative body and what their intent was with respect to that or that particular ordinance. And you may consider these ordinances separately, and they'll be on the ballot separately, but the evidence at some future trial will be if somebody claims ex post facto, or somebody claims that the particular law was targeted particularly at them, the fact that you had succession for county council, the fact that you had succession for controller but not county executive will be evidence that you were targeting one particular person. It'll be evidence of that. The fact that you exempted yourselves from a total ban on terms with succession will be evidence of ex post facto and targeting of particular individuals. So I'm just curious as to, since we've never had a three-term county executive, I'm just wondering what's going on here. Thank you very much.
Any other courtesy of the floor? Okay, thank you. Let's move on. Mr. Heckman made a good suggestion. I think I'd like to take the discussion regarding gift ban ordinance first, because I think that'll be a shorter discussion, and we've already had one, so if we could agree to move that forward. So I'm going to just bring up the fact that, Mr. Heckman, you did have some questions, and you did have something that you wanted rewritten, and so have you been able to get what you wanted, and are you satisfied with what has been rewritten to date?
Let me say, I was asked by someone outside, I didn't read it, but someone asked me if I detested Mr. McClure's amendment or Mr. McClure himself. And I don't mean this derogatorily, but I hadn't thought that hard about Mr. McClure to get to a point where I detest him or his amendment. No, I wanted to get a few things clear, which, in speaking with Mr. Spadoni, we spoke outside of here. It was clear, and I once we had that chat, I even said, if I'm repeating something that's already in it, let's not even bother putting it in. I think, like Mr. McClure just brought up with a few things, I think that's where it was with me. I mean, I didn't understand, I never really honestly spent a lot of time reading that part of the administrative code, because the charter was pretty clear. And my feeling was, if you have if you're in office, you better check your moral and ethical compass. I mean, if somebody's coming up and offering you Super Bowl tickets as a county council person, and there's somebody who wants to build something, or you think they're going to, you'd be crazy to take them. I mean, well, I've never gotten a gift. I don't want a gift. And I just think that I never heard of a problem. I didn't know there was a problem. I can't speak for everything or everybody, but all the time on council, even people I didn't necessarily get along with on council, I don't think anybody took advantage of their position in a sense that it was something unethical. Maybe I'm wrong. I obviously don't know what everybody does behind closed doors, but I mean, I don't think people, now if somebody got a bag of chips or coffee, I mean, I don't remember people value a virtue bragging about not taking that either. That's, you know, I mean, so I was just surprised, because as going back to even that, this has been, and this was written this way a long time ago. So I just wondered, as the executive alluded to with a different topic, what precipitated this? It just seemed to come out of nowhere, and I thought, geez, there's something going on. Did somebody make a major faux pas? Because as far as the executive goes, just like with the governor, he could say to his people, this is my executive order. But I understand if he wants to change it, the employees, it includes us, it includes his administration, it includes him. I would assume it concludes the DA and includes everybody. So I was never really opposed to it. I didn't think it came from a place of bad intentions. I was just not, I was surprised. I didn't, and so I guess I wanted to be in this very litigious society and where everybody claims to be a lawyer. And by the way, Mr. Spadoni and I had a nice discussion. I'm not going to pretend to be a lawyer if he doesn't pretend to be a councilman. And I think that that's where we've come to an agreement. Am I correct, Attorney Spadoni? So, okay, so I ask questions because that's what I've always done up here. And sometimes it's not because I think something's bad. I just want to be sure I understand it. And I understand it clearly, so I know the parameters of it. So, I mean, at the last meeting, I was the one who said, let's get this thing out to vote on it, either vote it up or down. It's been languishing. And I just wanted to make that statement for myself. I mean, I'm going to support it. Of course, I have nothing against it. I was just surprised that it was that many exceptions in the administrative code. And I guess I didn't pay a lot of attention because I always look at the charter. And so, yeah, I mean, and believe me, if I don't eat some vanilla ice cream at night, I'll survive. But while we were at the shore, my wife did offer to get me Coors Brothers, the custard.
Uh-oh.
Oh, I love that stuff. But I said, is anybody looking? Because if you buy this, I don't know what that might mean.
But according to the policy, you have an existing relationship. so
That's
you
true.
would be-
I have an existing relationship of over 50 years.
But I don't know that you answered my question. Was the thing that you requested in here
It's
to
covered.
your satisfaction?
Yes, absolutely, no problem.
You added it.
A lot of
You
it
didn't
had to
say-
do with when you go to CCAP, and I even had a conversation with Mr. Kusick about CCAP. Everybody there, I know kids run through, they take those bottle cap openers or something. I mean, I don't know if that's considered de minimis or not, but anybody can grab them. They don't check anybody's badge. So I wanted to be crystal clear because I didn't want to cross any lines inadvertently. And, but Chris, like I said, I'm fine with it. I'm willing to even introduce the darn thing. I think it's nothing wrong with it.
Anybody else? I just appreciate that you brought it up, and I think that your points at our last meeting were well taken, Mr. Heckman. The idea that did we even need to do this? Was it already articulated in the charter? Did it need to be defined this way? Like, a lot of us are newer, and you've had more experience than we have, so I just appreciate your perspective. And I don't see anything wrong. This is the mechanism that council has to discuss things. We need to discuss them in committee. We need to discuss them here. Like, there's no...
But no, I mean,
there's no
it was the sudden
malfeasance here.
I mean, Mr. McClure has been executive for 5 years. You were on council before. This never came up, and I was just like, "Whoa, what happened? Did something happen?" And so, but no, he's right. He's right. It's in there, and we should get rid of it. It'll make it extremely clear. So there you go.
Okay, so if we're good, motion
good.
to move it forward as amended to tomorrow night. Is it on the agenda? It's not on the agenda for tomorrow
Has to
night.
be introduced. What's
Is it,
I'll just make a motion then that we put it on the July 1st meeting agenda.
okay, July 1st?
Ah, you're right.
That's the 7th.
You're right. Yeah.
Okay. Moving back to the discussion regarding term limit ordinances. Should we take them one by one? Should we take them all together?
One by one.
All right, so let's do the council one first. The first thing that I know, and part of this, again, is that we need to work on it here. I see there's some gaps. The whole point was to work on it and make sure that it's intact. In the second paragraph B, the proposed question states that to impose the term limits on the council members commencing with the term of office which begins January of 20 blank. So that's not in there. So do we need to set that?
24? Would 24 be appropriate?
Are we within the, we don't have a time limit? No?
I left it blank because there was no directive.
Wait, what? What is going on?
Now, did this, I guess my question to Mr. Spadoni is, there was an existing council ordinance, correct?
No, there was, if I may,
You need to put your mic.
if I understand it, and I checked this with our clerk and deputy clerk, there was a proposal in 2017. However, it was not enacted, it was drafted.
So is this the exact draft, or has it been altered? Did you alter that? I mean, did you take it as it was, or did,
I copied it,
okay, so this is exactly as they presented it years ago?
and that was in my memo that I sent to you.
Okay.
Question. Now, wasn't this a passed as an ordinance? Because I always complained that I wouldn't, because it wasn't put out to the voters. Wasn't there a council that passed a three-term, did they do it as a resolution or an ordinance?
Ordinance.
Ms. Zembo?
If I may.
You-
I-
You have to turn your mic on. You turned it off.
So the question I have, because this should hit home for all of them in one sense. Does this body have the right to limit the terms of whether it be council members, the executive, controller, the DA, by mere ordinance, or must it be through referendum?
You are amending the Home Rule Charter, and this ordinance is for a referendum for the voters to decide.
So the current three-term limit that allegedly exists is meaningless.
And we are amending the Home Rule Charter. My opinion is ironclad. It needs to be done by referendum.
All right, so if I may I? Here's my thought. I've never been in favor of term limits. I've changed that over the years. I've evolved it to state and federal, definitely, term limits, because I've seen far too many people at that level park themselves for 20, 30 years. And I mean, the money they accumulate, even when they don't have opponents, I mean, it is just unbelievable the amount of money and of course, these guys are afraid not to contribute. So, you know, they contribute. I haven't seen a problem locally. This is my opinion. I haven't seen a problem locally. Council-wise, it seems the voters have done a pretty good job of deciding, with a few exceptions, of throwing people off and putting people on. I don't know if we really need to interfere in that. And I'm not just saying that because I happen to sit on county council. I'm in no way anyone has to worry about me testing those limits. But the thing is, I do think, though, if we're going to say a lifetime limit, and we'll get into that as we go, because I know that's pretty tough. I would say then you should do it for everybody. I would like to ask the solicitor again, because I'm not a lawyer. The mayor of Bethlehem is term limited, just as the county executive in Lehigh County is term limited. Is the mayor, and you're more familiar with the mayor, is that term limit for life, like 2 terms and you can never run again, or is that just 2 successive terms?
As a result of a phone call today,
Good.
I copied the case from the Supreme Court. Mr. Marcinson
Yes, I
was a
remember.
mayor, was in his second term.
Yeah.
And they had an ordinance that he could not run, and he ran and he won.
That's right.
He was removed from office.
What if he had waited another term and ran? I guess my question is, was he given a 2-term lifetime? And I think the executive brought that up, and that was a question I had. I mean, is he banned, is the mayor of Bethlehem, let's say Mr. Reynolds serves 2 terms, 2 full terms. He's out for a term. Can he run again for mayor?
I don't know.
Yeah, I just have a problem with lifetime. First of all, I have a problem with lifetime bans. But that's all I'll say right now. For the council thing, I just don't know if we need it. I never thought we needed it, but, you know, that's me. So I'll stop.
So let me just double back for 1 second, and then, Mr. Lott, you're free to speak. The intention here, in my simple mind, was that I knew of this council ordinance. I knew that there wasn't any for the other offices. Today, my intention was to tease out the language. I think the point that it states in succession, that's here, is not in the others, should be consistent. They should all three be consistent. I did have a thought about the term limits and the time for a reason, which I could share later. But the point is that there's, again, this needs to go to referendum. I'm looking for consistency. If council's the only ones that are term limited, why aren't the other officers? And if they want to stop for a year or two and come back, I see no reason, unless the voters see a reason to ask for that. But the point was to have some consistency in the offices with term limits, because it's stupid to just limit one elected and not the others. Now, we started to have that conversation about the DA, and we said, let's just focus on these for now. So that's my whole thought. It's not malicious, it's not directed toward a person, because we're all affected by it. So, paranoid ideation notwithstanding, this is simply what I was looking for. Go ahead, Mr. Locke.
Yeah, I've sat on council for 4.5 years now. I started a little early. In that time, I had not received one email. I had not had one conversation with a constituent that brought up term limits for local government. I have talked to people, and I'm not against term limits. I think they're very appropriate in some offices. Like Mr. Heckman said, I don't see where term limits are appropriate in our communities, in our townships, because quite frankly, when we get somebody good to step up, we do everything we can to keep voting them back in, because we need that. We need good people in our local governments. I believe this is a local government. So I'm really curious where this came from. Now, Ms. Fargo-Hefner just said because some council approved, now it is approved for county a 3-term. That is correct statement. Is that a correct statement? That is on the books, 3 terms for the county.
It was passed, but it wasn't passed by referendum. It was passed by the council.
So, in other words, there is your argument that why do we treat one different than the other? We're not really doing that because it's not on the books. So I would ask, where is it coming from? There's been a lot of concerns. Our residents have a lot of concerns. This has not once in 4.5 years has anybody said anything about you guys need to be term limited. The county, we have term limits. They're voters. So I'm just real curious. Before I can support this, I really need to know why we're doing this. And I did ask last meeting that Mr. Myers, President Myers, and a solicitor, how did we, because I was concerned when I first read this, how do we figure two terms, 3 terms? And he told me he randomly just selected them, and it was up to us to put them forward. So, with respect to what you're saying, we need to weed these things out, because I think a lot of this has just been kind of thrown out, and I'm not quite sure why. I would love to hear from other council people that are in support why we need term limits when it hasn't been an issue in the past. I really need to hear something, because I don't know why it hasn't been an issue. It's not an issue with the voters as far as anybody's ever, so I need to hear something other than what I've heard so far. Thank you.
Go ahead, John.
I think the issue of term limits is definitely more of a national politics and a state politics issue. And when people, as far as voters go, will see something come up on a referendum of, do you think our local officials should have term limits? I think it's going to be a popular consensus for the voters. But as somebody that sits here and somebody that is only planning doing this 1 term, I do think it is going to be a problem trying to find people that do these jobs, because it is, there's a lot more scrutiny and criticism than there are thanks. And, this gift ban, I feel like, is a perfect segue, because, so many gifts I've gotten so far being in this position. I do think there needs to be consistency if we do go through with these term limits, because I do think that, the executive is a full-time position. The controller is a full-time position. I don't think there's as watchful of an eye on local politics as there is national politics. I don't think most people in the county know who we are, for the most part. At least in my experience, people I talk to, they don't know who, they might not even know who the executive is or who the controller is. So for a fresh set of eyes to come through every 8 or 12 years, I don't think that's a bad thing. Even if it's, a matter of just different perspectives and different ways of doing things. For that reason, I do think we should have term limits. I don't like the concept of different terms and different, this one you could take a break and then come back, this one you can't. I think it needs to be consistent. I think that's good practice. But I also think, if somebody wants to serve on county council for 12 years, I don't think that's a bad thing. So maybe we talk about, 3 terms for everybody. If they take a term off and then they come back, maybe we don't disqualify that, because I do think it's hard to find people to do this job.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I would just say it's good to see new faces here once in a while. And I would say from my experience, I'm not going to name names, there have been people that have stayed too long. So, and when there are sitting incumbents, it is even more difficult to find somebody to run. Try running against my state representative. I mean, he was there when elected, I believe, when I was in high school. So I believe that a case can be made, certainly at the state level and even at this level, where you can get, more people and new people involved from time to time. Do the voters ultimately have a say? Yes, but I'll just tell you that when you think about running, if there's an incumbent there, that makes the decision much more difficult. So when you see that there's openings, that may give rise to more people that may be interested in running.
My message on this is consistency. The exec made some very valid points and wasn't where I looked at it and I didn't catch what he called. I think consistency is the thing, and I have been asked just how long can you run in these positions, because, I stick out like a sore thumb. So I've been asked that question a lot. So that's one of the reasons, I just think consistency. And you're right, new blood tends to bring out new ideas, and we're going to be dealing with a different generation in a few years for us old guys up here. So you need to understand, that's just me.
Yes, sir.
We probably should have put the DA on as a matter of consistency. I mean, our last DA had the office for 30 years. Whether he should have or shouldn't have, that was up to the voters. And it's hard to argue a populist position, which is let the people decide, to argue against that. But at the same time, the great Tip O'Neill once said, all politics is local. And sadly now, all politics is national. And we seem to take our cues from all the anger and angst at the national level, and I'm supposed to hate Mr. Giovanni, and he's supposed to hate me, and if he votes one way, I'm supposed to vote the other way, and oh my God. And usually we never really had much of that. I hate to say it, I think a lot of times it was more personality driven at our local level as opposed to party, but it is what it is. If there's been any, and this actually even goes to the gift ban too, even though I support it, if the executive's position is become more powerful, at least in my opinion, and I'm not, people have told me it's because you don't understand, you have more power, and I'm just talking about a perception. For example, if we get a contract that comes through the administration, if we get this, we vote on things, but we don't get all the information. Everything is controlled at the executive level. And this is nothing, I think Mr. McClure is right. This shouldn't be about Mr. McClure. It's just about the executive position. And this has come up before. I personally think it's probably the most powerful position in the county now because it's grown. I mean, we do a lot more than just run human services in the prison. I mean, we have a department, grants and whatnot. But Well, first of all, for me, it's a no-go with limiting somebody for life at local level. That I would never support. And I have to be honest. I mean, at this stage of the game, maybe it's there at some point. I'm not as concerned about he or her, or the next person running 3-4 times, as I am about money, campaign money. The amount of money that's being raised for local races is what's killing it. I mean, even in off years, people are building up these huge stockpiles. I mean, we have local officials who've been out of office for years and they're still giving them money out of their campaign funds. So, I mean, now you can't, I guess the Supreme Court ruled that they ruled that you can't stop someone from giving money, offering money to a candidate. That's freedom of speech. But the candidate doesn't have to take it. No, right?
Unheard of, but it's a possibility.
I know, it's unheard of. But no, I mean, I don't know if legislation along those lines would ever work. I'm less concerned with somebody running X amount of times than I am with the amount of money that comes with that. The money is the corrupting force for me. It becomes, Mr. Kusick mentioned, it becomes not just a popularity, but it's very hard to run against somebody who has a war chest that's huge. But people still have the right to vote against them. So I don't know. Maybe I was watching too much of the news from Florida yesterday. I mean, from my gut, from my heart, I could say, yes, we should put this out to the people and do that. But the part of me that's been around here, I don't think it's necessary. That's just my opinion.
So, did you want to say something, Mr. Brown? Tom, did you want to add anything? So what I'm hearing, if I'm hearing consistently and correctly, is that there is some disagreement as to whether to put these forward or not. I do hear that there is agreement to taking the language that was used on the county council members ordinance and making that consistent across all three, that the term "in succession" should be used, and even if we had to make it more succinct that this is not a lifetime ban, I mean, if you need to add that kind of language, do I have agreement, disagreement? Can we have some verbal, not nods?
I would agree with that.
Do we have concurrence on that? So if we're going to do it, we're going to make it consistent across all three. We're not here to say some can and some can't.
Right.
Correct?
Yes.
So my thought originally in the drafting of these was the three-term limit was set by the past
An ordinance.
ordinance. The 2 terms I did for the full-time because they were full-time. And when I look at county council versus the other 2, I think that we're here a shorter amount of time. It's a longer learning curve. But if you want to make it 3 for everybody, I don't care. If you want to make it 2 for everybody, I don't care. I just looked at it like it's council's here less time, the others are here full-time. So I'm open to any suggestion or amendment on that number. And again, if it's X in succession and they want to take a break and come back in the future, that's fine.
Am I recognized?
Go ahead.
All these would have to be amended at tomorrow's meeting.
I understand, but that's why
I know.
did
but I'm
this,
just-
because I don't want to put something out there and try to wordsmith it tomorrow, and that if we have this sort of tight today, and that's what the whole purpose of today was, to
Right.
have the discussion, to be able to get it ready, and to be, because I didn't want to just throw something out there.
Right, and then the motions will be made tomorrow night.
I think personally, I'd like to see a two-term limit for the full-time positions. I think Mr. Heckman's right. I think the executive has a powerful position, and with the contracts and with the appointments and with the publicity that comes with that position, power can be amassed. And I think the distinction between council as a part-time position where, like you said, Ms. Fargo-Hefner, there is a learning curve, and you're one of 9 You're more of a voice in a body that, I don't think one person can be an abuse of power. So if they're there for 12 years, I think that is a distinction that the part-time position should be able to reflect. So that's just my personal opinion. I think 8 years for the executive and controller. If they took a term off, they could come back. I just think 12 years in succession it's a pretty long time. It could be half a person's professional working career.
I'm sorry, but, it's important, and we should discuss it. I don't care if anybody thinks I talk too much or not. This is important
That's
stuff.
why we're here. Go ahead.
I know, that's why we're here. I'll try not to talk legally. You stop me if I do, Chris. But anyway, you heard what I said to the executive about what brought this up with the gift ban, and that I was just sort of surprised. I thought maybe he knew something I didn't, and something was going on. But I understand the need for thinking more about it. I guess then, yes, what's brought this on right now, that we need to limit terms? And I guess I can ask that because I'm at the end of that thing that Mr. Cusick gets tired of seeing the same faces. So you won't have this face to kick around very much longer.
Mine neither.
But God, I just don't. I don't think I'm going to be able to support this at this time. And there was something that I thought about that I thought was a little troubling, but I'll just leave it at that. And maybe at some point this is going to become a thing that it's term limited. I don't know. I don't see a problem now. Could there be a problem down the road? Like, for example, when I mentioned the executive power, I also, if you just slack off, Mr. McClure mentioned, we only had one executive try for a third term, and he was kicked out. I mean, so there's no guarantee that, let's say Mr. McClure decides to run for a third term, despite his winning personality. There's no guarantee that the voters would say, yes, we want Mr. McClure for a third term. Having said that, yes, there is a concern that a position can amass a certain level of power, and is that going to create a problem in local government? I guess I've always felt local government, I feel it very differently than state. And I mean, we're here, we're with the people, they're right here, they come in and tell you what they think of you, and you listen. We don't go out to Harrisburg, and hang out there. We don't go to Washington and hang out there. So I just wanted to be clear, if I am being clear, that at this time, I don't support term limits.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just say that I would prefer to see the voters decide. So that's why I will be in favor of this. And as far as the terms in succession, I can live with that for the other offices if people feel strongly one way or the other.
Any other comments or questions?
My only comment is I've always believed in the power of the people. Let the people decide what they want to do.
At this point, I'm more interested in getting this refined for tomorrow, but everybody seems to want to ask why somebody does something here. And everybody wants to assign motive, or they're looking at personalities and not principles. And, I'm elected to a job, I'm asked to do this governance committee. I listen to the conversations that we have, that our constituents have, and I've heard over my time here how we can't make changes to the charter unless we have a referendum by the people or a home rule charter study. And I keep hearing how expensive a home rule charter study is. And I keep, so It just seems like we have this thing coming up, we have an election coming up, we have this ordinance hanging out in the wind that may or may not be valid. We have it for one office, we don't have it for others. So do I want to expend millions of dollars, or do I want to make a move here to take the conversations I heard and try to make a change here? And that change is ultimately in the hands of the voters. So again, there's no intention, there's no personality. You know, people like to predict where we're all going to be in a year or 2 or 5. I'm here today. I might not wake up tomorrow. You know, I just want to do what's right. And I really, again, really believe in the power of the voter. I think they have the right to decide this. If most of the people say, I don't want term limits in local government, then we say yes and we put this out here and they vote no to it, it's done. But I'm going to do my job while I'm here, which is to have these discussions, to take those conversations and put them out in the light of day. And all I want to do is make sure that it's clean and it's clear when we present it tomorrow. So again, I think that Section 2 special qualifications should be amended in each of the other 2. And maybe we have to delete or tweak the special prohibitions. And so I think if somebody could draft the right language to read tomorrow night, so we're not stumbling around, that would make it a lot easier. I do have a question about, on the controller, on the second page, at the top of the page, it says during his term of office. Can we change that to the term and not have to do it by amendment? Because that's the only one of the documents that put a gender pronoun?
These ordinances were introduced as they are. Any
So I'm gonna have
changes
to make
have
an
to be
amendment.
made by a motion.
After the public hearing.
At the public hearing.
Okay. So that would be something I would request.
I'm fine with that.
I am too.
And I heard, and because there's a line there, we could add the dates, so I have the council at 2024.
For everything?
I don't know, I guess,
Yes.
well, county controller could be 24,
Because they're coming right now,
but the
Yep.
county executive would have to be 26.
26.
And is there anything else that anybody would change or amend?
Madam
Yes,
Chair.
sir.
So based on what I'm hearing, my sense is that for the county executive for 304, Section 2, that would be amended, or the potential amendment would be that no person shall be elected to the office of county controller more than twice in succession.
This is the controller one?
No, this is the county executive one. If you were looking for consistency, for item 2,
More than twice, and then add in succession?
in succession to that.
Now, what about that last part? And no person who has held the office or acted as for more than 2 years of a term to which some other person was elected shall be elected to the office more than once. So I assume, that assumes if someone had to be replaced midterm. Do we want to leave that as it stands?
I would.
Point of clarification, if I may. No person shall be elected in succession. I just wanted to make the change on my sheet.
No person shall be elected to the office of county executive more than twice in
In
succession
succession.
would be added.
After twice.
Okay, after twice. And, okay, I just wanted to be clear what we were doing.
And then if you look at the controller, would that be the same language? Yeah, it's already there.
Yes, in succession.
All right. So should there be something added that states, this does not designate that this is a lifetime ban? Or do we need to put that language in there, or is it done as it is?
I think it speaks for itself
All
if
right.
once you say in succession, that
succession.
the lifetime ban is excluded.
Yes, sir.
The county executive where, that after the amendment that you just made to it in succession, that whole follow paragraph, that doesn't, for a controller or a council. So if we're being consistent, either that gets applied or it gets removed to be consistent. So it says elected to, but you could be appointed, council could be appointed to finish a term, so on and so forth. So it's not quite clear to me.
So then, if, in succession, period, strike the and then make that no person who has held the office, and apply that consistently to the other
Or either
two?
remove it from county executive or apply it to the other offices. That's what you're saying be consistent, that's what we're trying to do, rationalize across each of the offices.
Should come out. I think it should come out.
A little voice inside me said it should come out completely.
Just come out.
I would,
Pull it.
I would agree with that,
Just pull it out.
yeah.
Well,
Makes it
you were
easy.
trying to address elected
Right.
process. If you're appointed and you finish,
That's a
know,
different story.
I think the municipal code, or county code dictate how long you could serve before you have to then be elected to, anyway, right?
I think that's.
Yes, so
Okay.
there's already something controlling that part, so.
So we just pull two. Is that correct?
No.
No.
It would just be amended to, no person shall be elected to the office of county executive more than twice in succession, period. And then just delete everything after that.
Okay. Okay.
So if I'm looking at this correctly, the controller's only amendment would be to change his to the, and add, we're going to add the date. The county executive is what?
26 for the exec.
The
24.
controller, section 401, the word during
No, the date's 24.
24,
24.
correct?
No, no,
24?
26
No,
for
the
the
county
exec-
executive is
26.
26.
26.
County executive is 26, and then it would be amended to, no person shall be elected to the office of county executive more than twice in succession, period. And then strike the last statement.
Yep.
And then the council is 24. And what about the language of shall not apply to terms previously served by the current members of council who shall, for purposes of this section, only be deemed to be serving their first term? Do we need to strike that? Do we need to keep that? Do we need to add that to the other two?
I would say strike it in order to keep it consistent with the other ones.
Will there be any question about the limitations, or is that not for any of these? Oh, I guess it doesn't matter, because if it starts on 24, then it starts then, and it starts with those elections, correct?
Correct. Yep.
All right. Any other questions or?
Just a quick question, and I'm not going to question anybody's motives, and I certainly hope that you take it that way. It's just, we all have our feelings about things, and I can see both. Look, when you say don't give something to the people, it's not exactly a popular position to take. So, I mean, I understand. But should we be addressing the DA?
Yeah.
I mean, one way you'll find out about how an elected official feels about this is if you tell a DA that they're only going to serve 2 terms. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to joke about it because I have a feeling this could end up in court no matter what we do or not do.
Could I just hold that thought for 1 second?
Oh, yeah, no, I just
Are
just a
we in
question.
agreement about these 3 before we move on to your point? Because your point is well taken, but I just want to make sure the discussion on these 3 are closed for now.
I'm good.
Until
I'm
tomorrow.
good.
Okay, go ahead, Ron, continue.
No,
We
no,
brought it up last time, I think people, because we were waiting to hear on the sheriff.
Yeah.
And I think we mentioned it, but we said, let's work on these first. And if you want to move in that direction, that,
Well-
again, it's your choice.
Yeah, I'm just asking because, as somebody sitting up here, I told you, as I've given this, pondered it and a lot of thought, I've sort of backed away from limits at the local level. But I do wonder if one of the ways somebody will come into council and say, well, gee, why didn't you add the DA? And that's all I'm doing, and I'll leave it there because I shouldn't be, I'm not going to be part of that debate, you know.
This is your meeting, and it's
No, I
not
know, but
mine. So
since
if you
I'm not
want to
gonna
do
vote-
that, say that clearly, and if you don't,
I
let's
think
move
it's
on.
up to the folks. who
So
wanna
then
do it.
I would just follow up, and then for the DA's office, that would fall under Section 505 of the Charter, under special prohibitions. I believe most of it has to do with other income that he would derive in office. But I believe that that would be the appropriate place to add the, I would just say a two-term limit. And the reason why I picked 2 terms is because that's what we do for the Attorney General at the state level. So I think that that would be consistent as well. So I wouldn't have a problem with that, and Mr. Spadoni, I don't know if that's something you'd be interested in drafting for us.
Certainly, if that's your desire, I'll draft it for your review.
Okay?
So then that would not be presented till July 1st.
I think for introduction in July.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Sure.
Being accused of participating in council's deliberations.
With my
One of the
approval.
things that should be said is that
Get closer.
the district attorney's office is a different breed of cat. As you can see, our current DA, who succeeded Mr. Morganelli, who's now a judge, Mr. Morganelli, I believe, served 24 years.
Give or take, yeah, 90,
I think he had 6 4-year terms.
something like that.
The one concern is that it is a very peculiar position for a lawyer to, they have to be almost career prosecutors. You'd have to give up your practice, it's a full-time job, and it attracts people that want to be like our current DA and Mr. Morganelli. And the voters decide who the best candidate is, as we have an election in the fall, obviously. But the one concern is that it's a career position in many respects. You see DAs across the state that serve for decades. In Lehigh County, I think Jim Martin was there for 30 years. I think he's retiring this year. So that's just a concern.
And if I could just respond to that, the question would be, there may be some ambitious young potential candidate who feels that they are unable to run against their boss. So having a term limit might provide them with an opportunity to run for the office in the future. So yes, there is a career path through that office, and having the limit might provide that opportunity for someone who maybe they don't leave and go into private practice. Maybe they think, well, you know, in 4 years, I can be the DA. So I think that there's pluses and minuses. I see both sides. But again, I think this is something that the voters should weigh in on.
Madam Chair, and I apologize if I'm repeating myself because I'm exhausted from my drive from Jersey. I was sitting on a beautiful beach, and then I'm driving here because I didn't want to miss this meeting. That being said, I do want to say that I think when we talk about the powers of the executive branch and council, legislative branch, over the years, I think, and you've heard me complain about this, council sometimes cedes to the executive branch things that we could handle. I've said this before, I'll say it again, I think we worry too much sometimes about lawsuits. I was here a year and a half when I got sued. I remember Carl Longenbach, I went to him and thought, oh my God, and he laughed. He said, don't worry. But I mean, I do think we have to bear, if there's a concern that the executive is getting too much power, I think we have to look at ourselves as well and see what are we doing in all of this and how are we handling it. I don't, like I said, I don't believe there's any ill will here, but it's just a matter of what you feel is important and what you feel isn't. But that's it. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay. Well, and again, I just keep saying it, this is our committee to have these discussions, this is our forum to do so. We're not allowed to do so any other way, and I'm not afraid of the voters. I'm just not. I mean, I guess if you are a career politician, maybe you are, but, you know, I'm not. I haven't been here for 20 years. I have another career, and, you know, that one will probably last a lot longer than this one does. I'm fine with that. But it's their voice, and if they say, well, I would like to limit the terms, great. And if they say, no, I want my DA there for life, that's how they'll vote. But, you know, it's just our job to give them the choice. That's all. That's all I think about.
We have another item?
Yes, sir. I have one more item, but go ahead.
Assuming these would move forward and go through and end up on a referendum, Mr. Solicitor, with the current ordinance that's on the books, that's kind of like it's hanging there. My understanding is it's not potentially enforceable, so do we need to withdraw it, amend it, delete it from as it currently is, assuming you're going to put this out for a referendum, so there's.
No one can hear you. You need to speak.
Oh, sorry. Do we need to take action on that ordinance to remove it, as opposed to just letting it languish in its current form?
If I may. I wouldn't kick the dog because you're now addressing it with a new ordinance for a referendum. And I think that's the only proper way to go.
All right, the last item for discussion is the discussion regarding possible home rule charter study. I should say thank you for your work on this. I appreciate everybody being honest with their opinions. The home rule charter study and sheriff position. My understanding is that Mr. Spadoni did research the sheriff position, and my understanding is that it must be done as part of the home rule charter study because it is a change in the form of government, whereas these are already in our government, and so these are just amendments, but that would be a total change. So that would have to be part of a study. So we could not make that occur just by will. So that was your original question, so are you satisfied with that? So then where are we at with the home rule charter study? I keep bringing it up, it keeps getting brought up. If there's pros, there's cons. I'll keep bringing it up every time, but
Can I hear some of the elder statesmen or the more experienced? What are the cons aside from
lifers?
the cost?
Don't worry about it. I've been insulted by professionals.
Obviously, it's expensive. I heard figures thrown around, $1 million, less, more. How real are those figures? What are the other cons? Because it seems like all we hear about are how vague the home rule charter is, and how it can go either way, and it's been there for so long without being looked at. So I think it's a no-brainer that we do a home rule charter study. What are the reasons why we wouldn't? And then if everybody's agreement that we should, maybe that's the next thing we do.
so there's only two real elder statesmen here, so go ahead.
Who's, boom, boom, not me.
Go ahead.
Well,
Experienced council member.
I'll chime in a little bit. I think you're kind of opening a Pandora's box once you do that. I'm not sure we could limit it. I believe your interest in some of you are just the sheriff. I'm not sure we can limit it to just that. And a home rule charter study it's also an election. So people do two things. They vote first whether or not they want to have the study. And if the answer to that is yes, well, there's a slate of people that they vote on who circulate petitions like they're running for an office. Once you empower them, there's really, you can work with them or you can give them thoughts, but there's no guarantee that they don't come back and say, you should elect the prothonotary. So I think that for me, I've gone back and forth. If you put it in front of me and said, vote on it now, my only suggestion would be put it on the ballot in the spring, because that's when people typically would circulate petitions. Because if you would want to do it like in the fall, people would have to circulate petitions and get on the ballot and run for the Home Rule Charter Study Committee. So that would be my, if you really want to do it, that would be my suggestion, is to schedule it for sometime next year. But again, I think there's pros and cons. I think I saw one article where somebody, maybe, I forget which reporter mentioned it, something about the pronouns. I don't think we need to go through this process to change pronouns. The question is whether or not you want to change the form of government. And that would be to something else. And something else could either be a council manager like they have in Luzerne County. It could be something like they have in Delaware County, where they have a council of 5 with a 2-term limit, by the way. So there's no telling who may run and what may come of it. But, you know, that, again, like we've said before, it would ultimately be up to the people to decide whether or not they want to vote for the prothonotary or not.
Yeah, and I would just add on to what John's saying. I agree. I mean, you are sort of putting it out there that you're talking about a sheriff. And now if we empower a Home Rule Charter Commission, yeah, you don't know who's going to be running, and say, well, the people will choose who runs or who's going to be on it. But then you're pretty locked in to what they decide. And, you may end up not getting an elected sheriff. They may keep the sheriff as it is, and they may change something else. I think it goes back to, and I know, John, you've talked to me about this, because you and I had a couple conversations. I know how strongly you feel about an elected sheriff. And we are unique in our appointed sheriff. And that's been brought up before. And the pros and cons were, well, what if you get some wild person with 6 guns? And I think they have access to what's the codes that the sheriff gets. They have the criminal record. They can look things up. And one of the things has been, well, that's a powerful tool. And the professionalism was always stressed. If you pick a sheriff, it's appointed, put up, we approve.
The courts are involved too.
Pardon me?
And the courts are involved too in the process.
And the courts have always been involved. So the thing is, you're trying to get somebody who has qualifications. Now, I guess theoretically, qualifications could be put in for an elected sheriff. I mean, Trooper Ron Rossai, who was the sheriff in Lehigh County for decades, was a state trooper, and he had already passed that. But I don't know, I think John Doe or Sally Mae could run theoretically and become elected sheriff, and with no provisions at all, they're elected. So, I would say, yeah, that the concern is you don't know what you're going to get. And I think part of it would be, just like we've talked about with a lot of this, what is the motivation? What is it that we're trying to accomplish with any of this? I think there was somebody who was here at one time, elected official up here, who was very strong into populism and believed that, almost everything should be voted on by people. But I will say this, I agree. If you do a charter study commission, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying, the old saying, you broke it, you bought it. Well, if you create it, you bought it. So I believe that's it. And I would say we could ask the solicitor to double check all of that. But I'm pretty sure if whatever they recommend, we're obligated to do.
Absolutely.
I don't think we can pick and choose. So
Appreciate the answer. Thank you.
that's the best I could say. I mean,
I guess what I don't ever hear when we bring this up, though, is like what we could actually look at. And I hear what you said, Mr. Cusick, the idea that you would have to have the election. And are you saying that you'd have the election to have it do you want it or not? And then the folks have to be elected at the same time? Is that articulated in the charter somewhere? Or could you say yes or no and then run it after and
It's
have
in-
people run? I
It's in
don't
the
know.
home- Yeah, it's in the home rule law.
State law?
Yeah, it's state law. So people would vote yes or no. If they vote no, then it's irrelevant. If they vote yes, then they have to choose a certain number, and we would decide the size of the study commission. I believe it has to be an odd number. Usually it's 7 or 9 or 11. And then, typically these things can take a year, 2 years even, and then whatever they decide ultimately would then have to go back to the voters if they decide to make any recommendations for a change. So
So
it's
there is a
long
bump
process.
stop that they could say, I want to do something outrageous, and the voters could say no. But it's an all or nothing, or is it,
Well, they would do a study, they would make a recommendation whether or not to change the form of government, and what it would be. It could be a return to 3 commissioners and elected row offices. It could be something like Luzerne County, I believe, has a council of 11 people and an appointed county manager, no executive. So there's several models out there that they could come back with.
or they could say, we'd like to retain the current form of government with the following amendments, and then they could add some amendments, correct?
That is possible, but again, that will be up to the commission to
Yeah, I
come
think
up
they
with.
can have hearings, and people will ask, come in, they probably could give their opinions, they'd want the executive, they wouldn't, I mean, that's how we were created, I mean.
Yeah.
And so, but at the end of the day, it's their call.
Yeah.
You have Kev.
Kevin, sorry.
So, our current form of government, we have 4 districts. We have 9 people on council, the oversight on our executive. We could come out with 3 commissioners that are elected all out of Bethlehem. Absolutely could happen. Probably might happen. I don't think that's the best representation of all our citizens. We have no control. That's a very real possibility that you get 3 commissioners, and with the voting block like we have it, it could vary 3 commissioners out of Bethlehem. So, I mean, if you guys want to roll the dice, I have yet to hear that our form of government didn't function. I think we functioned very well through the pandemic. I think we have a lot of oversight in our form of government. And I am not willing to risk this functioning form of government that represents our whole county and take a chance. We don't know what we get. And I'll say it again, 3 commissioners from Bethlehem you could end up with. I'll end that. Thank you.
I'm not saying it isn't. It's serious questions, and it's a serious discussion, and council should have, council should have discussions they believe in, and this is serious, but, that is probably, I would think, one of the most serious decisions that council would probably make, short of, I'm sure people would say taxes or something, that you could make, which is to put that out there about a home rule charter study, but I don't know.
I think what I'm not hearing, to follow up on Ron's point for putting this out for a study, is what is the impetus and what is the drivers that would really move this forward in a positive way? I think when it was done originally, when we moved from a change to the home rule charter, there was significant impetus at that time a lot of motivation, and there was a reason to really put this forward and have that evaluation done. I'm hearing a number of issues with the home rule charter, maybe the sheriff comes up on a regular basis, but on balance, they all seem to be more minor than the risk of potentially completely upending the current form of government that we have. If we were to seriously want to undertake this, I think I'd want to really delineate, okay, go through the home rule charter, go, okay, section A, 12, 14, 32, 90 are really problematic, and weigh that against the risk, and then potentially see if what we might be able to do outside a study to mitigate some of those concerns out of those items identified. But I don't have that, so this is kind of like an interesting conversation. I've heard it before. It's not a new conversation because it does bubble up to the surface, every so many councils. But I'd want to continue this conversation more with that structure. Then bring back what would you want to change? What is your concern? And then begin to really evaluate: can we do it by ordinance, or can we do by some other methods to plug those gaps that we're trying to fill? The cost, the time, and once you start this ball rolling, it becomes it's going to become all-consuming for a long time. And without that context, I'd have a hard time going, just vote yes, let's go do this, just for kicks and giggles. To Ron's point, I mean, once you do this, it becomes a very serious undertaking, and I'm not sure I understand enough of the concerns to really be able to go, let's do that. I'm open to it. I've heard these complaints for as long as I've been involved in local government, but I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
Lori, I have concerns. I'm like Kevin, Mr. Lott. Right now, and where we are in the country itself, everybody's upset at government. So you open it up to the voters, I think we're gonna have a lot of issues, a lot that we're not gonna think about. Because right now, people are not happy with the government. Local, federal, state, doesn't matter.
Go ahead.
Just one thing, and I have to agree with Kevin. The fear of losing what you have now is something quite alarming, because now you have equal representation. You have 4 districts and you have 5 other, so this is the way, and it's working. There are some things we can look at, but it's crystal clear what the solicitor gave us today. If we move on this, it's got to be the whole shebang, and I wouldn't be comfortable with that at all.
The truth is that I wish that when they did this the last time, they would have put something in the charter that would have allowed for some simple review, like an intermediary step, that you could do amendments, or you could look at it every 10 years and make some commentary without having to reopen a whole study, but they didn't. And so, again, I appreciate you all being willing to have the conversation. I'm getting the consensus that it's not the desire of council to move in this direction at this time, and I'm fine with that. But I do appreciate what you said, and I think that our staff has always looked at what are some little pieces that aren't consistent, so maybe we need to have this meeting more often to continue to do what we did with the term limits, and there are pieces of things that this could be a problem, or this could be amended or updated, and it's just slower work on our part, but I think we should do that. Did you want to say something else, Mr. Brown?
I was just going to articulate what you did, which was use this committee to begin that process of rolling up and accumulating what we really feel needs to be changed, and then over time really see what that body of work would look like, and alternates before we would go down the study. If we can't come up with alternates, then that may inform this conversation over again, but with more evidence-based type of information.
Because I appreciate your point, the idea of I have no impetus for it, except I keep hearing, it's been 50 years, we haven't done it. And I don't remember 50 years ago what happened or why. Was I even here at the time? I don't know. I don't think I was. Was I here in the county? When was the last study?
78.
I was not yet here. I might just have shown up at the door, but I wasn't paying attention to the home rule study. I was at college. So I wasn't paying attention then. But I don't see a major problem with the form of government. I just think that there's little things that need to be tweaked, and so we just have to do our due diligence, that's all. But thank you for your time and your attention. And with that, can I have a motion to adjourn? Thank you.
Motion.
Thank you. Is there an early meeting tomorrow? There's an early meeting tomorrow, right? 3:30?